York Governor Andrew Cuomo is attempting to deflect from a series of scandals and alleged cover-ups, and in this case, the deflection is largely good, marijuana legalization. But the question of who will benefit most from this decision still remains. Our next guest, Matt Stieb, associate editor and writer at the New York Magazine, joins me to discuss his piece detailing New York State's move towards marijuana legalization and specifically who profits. Matt, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Yeah. Hi, Emma. How are you?
I'm doing all right. So let's start broadly. Estimates show that legal cannabis will generate over $4 billion in revenue for the state. You know, if I were dictator of New York, this would have been a no-brainer. I would have done this so long ago. So that begs the question, why now? How did the state legislature get this done given Cuomo's opposition in the past?
Yeah. So Cuomo has been opposed to marijuana legalization from about 2013 when it started to get into the national conversation to about 2019 when he fully came around. A lot of that was due to New York specific politics. He is known as someone who likes to control everything in Albany. So he reportedly supported a group of Democrats who broke off as a faction and caucused with Republicans so that he could have more power. So the word dictator that you used is interesting. It's not quite there, but there's power.
The IDC, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to just expand for our listeners and viewers what the IDC was?
Sure. So I'm not quite sure exactly when it began, but it ran until the 2018 midterms when everyone was unelected. And there was a group of moderate Democrats throughout the state who kind of broke off to join the Republicans with the vote so that in the state Senate, there wouldn't be a Democratic majority. So the assembly was run by Democrats, but the state Senate wasn't. So it created this environment in which Cuomo was able to kind of dictate the terms of what sort of legislation would get passed and what sort of things were working. That ran out in 2018 when Democrats voted out the 5 remaining members of the IDC. And at that point, there was a state Senate majority and a state assembly majority. So come 2019, it was in the cards to say, okay, this is going to get legalized, but it still wasn't there. A couple efforts didn't really get over the goal line. In 2020, the state Senate got a supermajority. So, are able to dictate basically the law. You can't overturn that supermajority from the Republican side. So combining that supermajority in the Senate with the assembly control and Cuomo's recent political crises, which are related to his alleged misconduct, as well as his office's alleged moving around of numbers to make it sort of cover up the deaths during the beginning of the pandemic in nursing homes. So you put those two things together in an impeachment inquiry and an investigation from the state attorney general into the nursing home thing. That's a lot of power that is now gone. So with that new calculus of what you can do, they did this marijuana legalization bill, as well as taxing the millionaires in New York, adding 2 new tax brackets for big earners, and then also legalizing sports betting on phones. So stuff like FanDuel, which, the 3 of those things in 3 weeks, pretty crazy.
Yeah, as a admitted sports gambler, this is not good for my pocketbook, but I digress. I'm very excited about it. I'm also enthusiastic about just justice and cannabis legalization in this instance because it's New York is a very blue state, and it's well past time that New York legalized marijuana. So some people are saying that New York's law doesn't go far enough, but a lot of what you wrote about shows that it is more progressive than other states. There's still some things that could be improved for sure and don't go far enough in many instances. But can you expand on some of the provisions that progressives might be happy with, including the 40% reinvesting number in communities that have been hurt by punitive drug policies? Can you touch on that and other elements of the law?
Sure. So New York was pretty late getting to the table on this. I think either 2012 or 2013 is when the first states, Colorado and Washington, were able to do it. But the fact that they came so late to the table are able to learn from a lot of unintentional mistakes or misses on other laws. And that's really where this success is, not the fact that New York is legalizing, but the way it is legalizing. So this law for tax revenue from selling weed, there will be 40% of it returns to communities that have been disproportionately damaged by the war on drugs. The other 40% will go towards education, and I think the remainder is still being figured out exactly where that goes. But Crystal Peoples-Stokes, who is the sponsor of the bill in the Assembly, said that this is a lot more than raising revenue. It's about investing in the lives of the people that have been damaged, and from that 80%, that's clear that those aren't just words. They're putting that money, that revenue, towards people who have been hurt, and at the same time, there is a pretty significant dent or hole to fill in the New York budget. So they could move that money elsewhere, but by passing those other measures, and they're able to, put teeth in this thing in a way that other states haven't. Another big aspect of it is that all criminal charges or convictions that took place prior to legalization that are now legalized, any act of possession or small sales is now expunged from a record, which is a big deal for someone who's applying for a loan or for school or job or something like that. And then the third element that I see looking through this that is separates New York is what they're calling like a social equity applicant program. So people who are disabled, people of color, people who have been arrested or have had family members arrested are able to apply and access 50% of the dispensary licenses, which, half of the market is a lot. And in other states, you've seen these attempts happen, but they don't quite get over the goalposts because economically it's still very difficult to get into the marijuana business. Banks don't actually loan. I think there's like 400 banks in the US who would do it, but if you're a federally chartered bank, you're not going to loan to a business that is selling something that is scheduled as a class 1 drug along with LSD and MDMA and a few others. So that's
Heroin.
yeah, so that's difficult. And with this social equity program, there's something called an incubator loan program. So there's going to be a lot of terms here, but the medical marijuana dispensaries that are already operating are all big players. They're called multi-state operators, and they're mostly billion-dollar companies. Some of them are publicly traded, and they are going to want to expand into expand their medical access and their recreational stuff as well. So when they're doing that, they're going to be hit with a nice tax, and that tax is going to go towards this loan program that is going to be able to provide money, either no interest or low interest. I'm not sure which, that people will be able to use to actually get this business going, because it's a lot of overhead. You have to get the lease, and you have to staff it and buy marijuana to sell. And between all these things in other states like Massachusetts and Illinois, they've made these attempts to have social equity programs, and they have fallen short, where New York has appeared to learn from these things and for the better.
Yeah, I want to return to some of the lessons learned from states like Massachusetts and Illinois in a little bit, but I'd love if you could expand on the equity protections that essentially protect upstart companies in the state from these already large multi-state big marijuana retail businesses. So essentially already established marijuana firms, they're going to be limited in their ability to open dispensaries, right? So that there's a cap on it, as opposed to Florida, which I believe you cite in your piece, where it seems like there was no cap and it's all a free open market, and these big companies can just come in and buy up the whole industry in the state after they've legalized. And that's not necessarily the case in New York, right?
Right. Yeah. In other states, you've had that. I think there's one large firm that I spoke with called Curaleaf, and they had 37 dispensaries in Florida, which, Florida has a lot of people, but if you have 37 dispensaries in a medical market, you're not going to be able to access it unless you have this huge capital to really break in. New York, it's limited to 8 dispensaries. Those are all medical for these big firms that are already in the medical market. And then 3 of them, in addition to those 8, they'll be able to have 3 recreational stores like attached to them. They're not sure if it's going to be actually in the store or attached or whatever. But so that's a limit of 8, which cuts down on the.
I'm sorry, just one quick question. So they will be siloed, these medical and recreational facilities. You can't go into a medical marijuana dispensary as a recreational user and buy it. That's going to be a very different, distinct situation.
Yes, they will be different. I think medical now is allowed to make stuff a little stronger than the recreational market. And so there will be 2 distinct markets. And which kind of makes sense, because if you're accessing it for that medical reason, you have to get a license and apply. Where this, for recreational, it's as soon as you're 21, you can go to the store and get it. So those protections are in there to kind of limit the big operators. And then for smaller operators, you can apply for all sorts of different applications, which, either at the license level to sell or for distribution or to grow it. And so there's going to be a lot of opportunity to hop in at a marketplace that makes sense. And I spoke to one person who's been selling weed for about a decade. And, a few years ago, I talked to him and he said he's interested in, breaking in once it's legal. And I asked him if sort of it's having all these big operators in the game is scary, or if there's going to be a concern like that. He said, no, it seems like there's enough space for everyone to be able to get in if you want to and have the know-how and access to some money, that you can get there. And again, by providing access to money through these loan programs, then it does open it up in a real way.
Hi, I'm Sam Seder. You can watch the rest of this interview and more on our Peacock show, which streams at 5 p.m. weekdays on The Choice from Peacock TV.